morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There we go. So today, Rhiannon has stepped up to start talking to you guys about
negotiation, actually.
negotiation. So well, it's also troubleshooting too, right?
Yeah.
And so brought her on board September 2016.
No, actually.
Yes, it was 2016.
September.
I have it right here.
It was in January.
Of 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, but it says in my system September.
No, did that say deceased? What?
No. No, that's just past the exam. That's Montana over there that I met yesterday. From the page, Rhiannon is what an old friend of mine, Stan Fuller, president of Earls, used to say. She's the wow factor. You know, you always want to wow your customers. Every time that she comes into the room, I see her talking about business, helping people. It's always a wow. She participates, she shares ideas, she mentors, and she speaks her mind. Mm-hmm. And well, seriously, that's what I want. That's what we all need. So I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you helping us get our staff meetings better organized. Yes. And for anybody here and anybody outside of here on internet land, and if you want to come in and chat about your best practices, your best ideas, Doug and I welcome you with open arms. And so without further ado, it's all yours.
Awesome. Not for mental, but for me. Yeah, right. Talk about the wow factor. Okay, everybody, we're going to get started here. And I want to thank you all for being here today. There's a lot of ground to cover, and I am not going to lie, we are not going to get to everything, but I want to leave you with tips and tricks that are going to be actionable for you. So we will get to those at the end of this presentation, but there's some groundwork that we have to lay 100% so that you understand a bit about negotiation and a bit about how you actually drive conversations. So next slide, please. Bingo, bango, bongo. Thank you. About me. So why should you even care? So I've been in the business 14 and a half years now, working in Vancouver and in the Lower Mainland. I specialize in transitional real estate. I help individuals and families in highly emotional states deal with their transactions, loss of loved one, divorce, seniors leaving their home for the first time in 30, 40 years, relocations. So I come with a breadth of experience here that ties very nicely into negotiations because I am constantly in negotiation when I'm talking to any of the clientele that I'm working with. And as you'll learn today, every single day, each and every one of you is in negotiation as well. Mm-hmm. So before we get to the next slide, your recommended reading. If you do not have a pen, you need one now, or you need to find a way to write this down. This is your recommended reading, and everything in here in both of these books is going to help you immensely. So you have Exactly What to Say for Realtors. This is by Phil M. Jones. This is an absolute necessity if you are dealing with clientele. It is going to give you literally the upper hand in any conversation. I know mine's tabbed. It's a short read. I promise it is worth every penny. The second one is the 6-Minute X-Ray. And this is by Chase Hughes. And he's a behavioral scientist, used to be in the Army. And so he's put together all sorts of tips and tricks for reading body language and for having the upper hand in negotiation and in a conversation. Swear to God, if you do not get these, well, I can't help you with anything else after that. Okay? All right. So let's keep jamming. Boom. Moving right along. You got the recommended reading. Sorry, I forgot I put that slide in. So the course outcomes today, really, this is the most important part. I want to increase your conversion rates. I want to protect your commissions, and I want you to close more deals. Who cares about the rest of the stuff? You need that. All right? Moving right along. Brilliant. This quote says everything about negotiation in one fell swoop. This is, let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear negotiation, by John F. Kennedy. And this could be applied to right now with all the stuff going on in Canada and the US, but this should be applied to every single time that you step into a negotiation on behalf of your clients or with your clients. Because coming at this from a fearful place will not benefit anyone, and least of all yourselves. Let's go. All right. So why negotiation is a core skill in real estate. So up here, this is a nice quick graphic of why that is. So more listings, higher commissions, higher total compensation all around. You get more referrals, more buyers, higher referral fees, better results, higher productivity. You get greater satisfaction from your clients. More marketing gets you more business, excuse me, and gets you more money, right? Who wants more money? Everybody? Yeah, if I don't see everybody's hand up, this is obviously not going to work out today. You might as well just leave. So what I'm trying to say here is that the negotiations that you get involved in, day out, will bring you this as long as you follow the steps in here and you make sure that you're not practicing on your clients, you're not practicing in negotiations for the first time, you're practicing outside of that. All right, we'll get into that as we go through. Next slide, please. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And this is in every single part of your life. This isn't just talking about clients and whatnot, but 100%. This has to do with you getting paid and everything that you want in life. All right. So that's probably the most important quote you're going to see today. All right, next please. So the negotiator's mindset. This is actually kind of cool. I'm going to try and make sure to cover all of this stuff off. So these are the 10 pieces that all professional negotiators, they get into this mindset. And this is very, very important. So first thing that you need to have is confidence and self-empowerment. So how that looks like is visualizing yourself being successful and not being fearful when walking into any of these negotiations. This isn't a confrontation, it's a negotiation. And you should never approach it as a confrontation. You want to be able to be confident and calm when you're actually in negotiation. All right. Emotional intelligence. All successful negotiators have an element of emotional intelligence. And that is because you need to be able to manage not only your emotions, but that of the client or the person on the other side of the negotiating table. I mean, that right there, think about it with your spouse, right? Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whoever it is. How many times have the emotions run a little bit hot and then the negotiation falls apart, right? And you could just be negotiating over dinner, like what we're going to make, right? And then shit gets out of hand. So it's important to have that emotional intelligence. Adaptability and flexibility. So in all negotiations, you have to be adaptable and flexible because you don't know what's going to come from the other side. You don't know what's going through the other people's head. As you see, we can prep and sort of, get a good understanding of what that looks like. But that preparation only goes so far because you're not sitting in somebody else's head. So you do have to be able to adapt and be flexible and not so rigid. All right. Next one, focused on interests over positions. So when you're coming at a negotiation from a position of power or a position of weakness, depending on what the negotiation is, you should focus less on the position and more on the interests of both parties. So what is the most important part to my seller? Or what is the most important part to my buyer? How can we bring those things together for a positive outcome for everybody? That makes sense? Excellent. Awesome. Next, respect and rapport building. So Chantel last week in her presentation actually touched on this, and that for her, one of the most important things that she did in building her business was having great relationships with other real estate agents. And 100% that will carry you through the rest of your career. I can promise you that. So, and that's creating great relationships, even when you walk into an open house, right? You're touring your buyers. Hey, how's it going? Build that rapport now, because that's money in the bank that you may need to cash in on later. That makes sense? Awesome. Strategic planning and preparation. We'll talk a lot about this today because professional negotiators plan what they're going to say, how they're going to say it, and they practice it and prepare it. They don't just wing it. Winging it is not an option when there's millions of dollars on the line. Does that make sense? Awesome. Problem solving and creativity. This is very important because it's true. In all negotiations, there is an element of creativity. And to get a deal over the line, sometimes you got to think, you've got to get creative. You've got to look for solutions that may not evidently be there, but if you dig a little bit, you can find them. It's very important to be able to problem solve and be creative to get these deals over the line. Number 8, patience and stamina. Sometimes it just takes time, right? You got to sit back and you've got to let something percolate, whether that be on the buyer side, the seller side, even for yourself, right? Just to take a hot minute, but you do have to have that patience going into negotiations. Number 9 is probably the hardest thing to actually, especially as an agent, get to the point of, because so many of us in this room and on TV land there would love for everything to be perfect and rosy and for us to be appreciated all the time. But sometimes a negotiation fails and we take that personally, and we cannot do that. It's a negotiation. It should be separate. There should be no emotion in it. Not for you, especially because you're managing everybody else's emotions. So you've got to take yourself out of that. Make sense? All right. And then finally, integrity and trustworthiness. You have to come at a negotiation from a standpoint of integrity. If not, well, it's not going to end well for you. I can promise you that. All right. Moving right along. Boom. So I know it's a little bit tight on the screen here. Again, I'm trying to cover off a lot of ground for us. So these are the different types of negotiator that you're going to find. This is an overview of the 10 types. And then we're going to get into a couple of the other things as well. So first off, the accommodating style. So these people prioritize maintaining those relationships, and they want to be very accommodating of other people. They they care what people think about them. All right. So pros about that, they've got it's the ability to save face, right? And everyone feels good when they're dealing with one of those people. So you've got the avoiding style of negotiation. So those people just avoid conflict and avoid negotiations at all costs because they don't want to get into that space. And I know that there are so many agents who, especially in their first couple of deals, are like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'll just let it happen. Being and coming from that space and avoiding the actual negotiation is detrimental for your client and then for the end result for you as well, right? So that's that. Collaborating style. So this is the negotiating style that lots of people try to attain. So when you approach it from a collaborative style, you're trying to bring everybody together. You're trying to create a win-win situation, and a win-win should kind of feel like a loss for everybody, right? No one actually comes out on top, but everybody does get a little bit of something they want. So that's sort of what everyone kind of strives for. Then you have the competing style. So characteristics of this, just think of Donald Trump. He's aggressive, right? He constantly gives and takes away. There's tricks to it, and you never feel like you're on solid ground, right? And that is the competing style. Next slide, please. Then we have the compromising style. So these people seek a middle ground, right? Always trying to get into that space. So they like to maintain relationships, of course, but it can lead to dissatisfaction because it never feels quite right? Because you're always just kind of compromising for everything. And then you have the principled negotiating style. And this is where I live. This is what my 14 years have got me to. So I focus on the interest very specifically. Emotion does not play a part in it for me whatsoever. I encourage mutually beneficial results, but that doesn't always mean letting the other people win, because I'm going to be honest, I want what's best for my clients. So I'm going to go all out for them, right? But it's principled. So very highly ethical. So we never overstep any weird bounds or anything, but we do like a very structured approach. And that's what you'll see going through some of this. And then you can get a team negotiation, which is actually kind of interesting. You get those a lot in commercial deals for sure, but you'll see it sometimes on real estate teams where you'll be negotiating with the person whose listing it is, but then they'll parachute in like a lead negotiator, or they'll parachute in the team leader to actually come and finalize the negotiation. So you'll see that. All right, moving right along. So in the grand scheme of things, there's really only three parts to negotiation that you need to understand when you're coming at it from a very basic standpoint. You've got compliant, collaborative, and competitive. These are the three main styles that you're going to see everywhere. So compliant is a lose-win. Collaborative is a win-win. And of course, competitive is win-lose. So on the compliance side, so the most important thing that you have to understand is what the fear is behind their negotiating style. So these particular people are feared, like, I'm scared of not being liked, and they really want to be liked in a situation where they're bringing a negotiation to the table. But you can't come at a negotiation from that standpoint. You will get walked all over. I can promise you that, especially for someone like me. Like, I'm gunning for it, right? When I'm representing my clients. So in a win-win situation, the fear there is giving up too much for too little, that the exchange just isn't quite right, right? And then the fear on the competitive side is losing altogether, right? So if you understand the fears of the other people you're negotiating with, you can actually have the upper hand. Because that's the most important part, is how do you overcome the fear on the other side of the table? And that could be you're sitting down with your clients who are looking to list their place, and there's fears that you have to overcome there long before you ever get the property on the market. Okay, so far so good. I know I'm sorry I'm going fast, but there is so much more to catch up on here. All right, so we're gonna scrap this. You guys can get the slides later and we can look at stuff again. So I just want to do this. So what do you think actually happens when a competitive person meets a compliant person? Anyone?
Competitive person wins.
Yeah, yeah, you get bowled right over. Competitive person totally wins because the other person's just rolling over, right? How about a competitive person meeting a competitive person? Well,
They're just butting heads.
yeah, butting heads, totally.
Yeah.
You could get deals, like Michael said, that do not come together because there's too much hot-headedness happening. How about a collaborative person meeting a competitive person?
Get the people.
It will take time, but you will get the deal done because someone's gunning for the deal, right? For sure. And then how about when a collaborative person meets a collaborative person?
So win.
Everyone feels good. Yeah, it's a great and easy transaction to make, right? And then a collaborative person and a compliant person. What do we think happens then? I mean,
The deal gets done.
the deal gets done for sure.
Lots of clauses.
Yeah, there's lots of things that are put in there for us covering for sure. But then also in this scenario, the compliant person is gonna still roll over. Right? More importantly, that's what always happens. And then a compliant person and a compliant person, how do you think that actually goes?
Deal doesn't get done.
Oh, but are you sure? Oh my God, is that okay? Yeah, it sounds like that. All right. Okay. Nice. Thank you for participating. Awesome. So we're going to get into this part, which is kind of more the meat and potatoes of everything. So I want to go through crafting your actual negotiation strategy. So there's 10 points here that we're going to start with. And we're going to do, so there's two phases. So this is phase one, which is like the preparation phase, if we could give it that sort of a title. So we want to master the power of persuasion. So you want to be able to persuade people long before you are ever persuading them. All right. So that's setting the stage before you ever get into the negotiation. So nice example. I wrote down the example so I could have them for you too. So if you're negotiating a price reduction for a buyer, prime the listing agent by subtly discussing the recent homes that have sold below the price that's listed at, right? So they kind of, you're priming the stage and setting it so that you know what's coming. Make sense? So the use of behavioral analysis models. So that's going back to this book. And I will tell you what's in here is incredible. So that's everything from learning to read the other agent when you're at a listing presentation and and reading their cues off of them. So that's eyes, that's arms, how they stand, how they interact, and how they speak. That makes a huge difference. gathering intel like a pro. So when we say this, this is stuff that you're probably already doing, right? So you're like, you're talking to the listing agent, and you're like, so why are your clients moving? You know, what's behind all of this that's happening for them? How long have they lived there? How much did they pay for the original property? That's all your due diligence stuff. But if you ask the questions in the right manner, using stuff out of this book, right? Exactly what to say to realtors, then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to open up a whole other space for the agent to start talking and giving you information that they may not otherwise want to give you. Because not every agent out there understands that revealing their client's position is a bad thing, and it's people like me who come along and find a way to get that information out of you. Like that's what we do, right? So, and there's little tips and tricks in this book that can help, right? Everything from being as simple as, well, I'm curious to know. So why is it that they're selling? Right? Just a simple change of words as opposed to just being, why are they selling? To I'm curious to know. Right? Just that subtle shift and that subtle difference will create a familiarity between you and the person you're talking to and make it easier for them to divulge information. Okay. Use, like I'm saying, exactly what to say, language patterns out of that book. It really is very helpful. So a couple of my other favorites, I'm not sure if it's for you, but so I use that a lot, right? So I'm not sure if it's for you, but I've got this great listing that's come up and it's a hot deal. Did you want to go see it? And people are more likely to say yes, because the language pattern in that is, I'm not sure if it's for you. Well, they're like, well, why wouldn't it be for me? That's what they think, right? And that's what they internalize. A lot of this stuff is psychology that we're dealing with here, right? The other one that works really well is most people. So if you say the words most people do X, Y, and Z. So most people will list in this phrase as opposed to waiting to summer. Right? So, and then people who hear that are like, well, I'm like most people. I'm not an outlier. Right? So that's the psychology behind the verbiage, and it changes everything. So again, I highly recommend this book. This will help you. And there's like role play cards to go with it, which we'll talk about later. I know, I'm gonna harp on this for a while. And then we move on to number 5. So establish the frame. So who controls the narrative wins is really what it is. So you want to be the one to control the entire narrative for the negotiation. So, and people buy into the frame that is set first. So let's give you an example. Instead of saying, would you take $750,000? Because that invites rejection. They can say no right out or like yes. So instead of saying that, say, given the inspection findings and market conditions, most sellers in this situation accept an offer in the 740 to 750 range. Would you like to be at the high end of that? Just changing the actual verbiage subtly will help immensely. All right, we're gonna move right along. So give the illusion of choice. So you've had this happen to you, I'm sure, where someone has given you the illusion of choice. So would you prefer a quick close or slightly longer closing with a bit more flexibility on terms? Basically, you're giving them choice, but it's choice that benefits you in both sides. All right. So next, we want to go to 7, which is pre-frame for reciprocity. So that's by giving something in advance to get something down the road. Right? That's the very simple part of it. And that can be with your sellers. That can be in negotiation with other agents. And of course, that can work well with your spouse. Give something to get something, all reciprocity. Test for hidden motivators. This one's actually kind of cool. So I like this one because it's like a soft assumption is probably the best way to describe it. Let me give you the example. You probably have a number in mind that would make this decision easy for you. what does that look like? So if you use something like that, it gently nudges the other person to reveal where they're at, where their head's at, right? So you can use that, like especially sitting down and you're having a listing presentation like I'm going to later today. That's something that I'll 100% use. So you've taken a look at the market and you probably have an idea of price, right? So it's just gently getting them to that other space rather than me saying, this is what your house is worth, right? Because this is all part of the negotiation. Okay. All right. So then we've got, setting negotiation anchors. So this is actually, you'll see this has actually happened with Donald Trump a couple of times now, where you set the anchor and it makes any counter anchor or counter offer sound very reasonable. So the first thing that you would do is maybe you would float so if I was the buyer's agent coming in to talk to a listing agent, they'd be like, oh, wow, this place is great. Yeah, my clients are thinking that they'd like to make an offer. We're thinking 750 and say it was listed for 875. We're thinking 750. So, and they're like, well, we're not gonna be able to make that work. When I come with an actual offer to them, something that's higher than that, our price already looks reasonable because it's not as low as what I already floated. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, and that's really just framing it so that you do look more reasonable, even if, you're still coming in a little bit lower. All right. That's a very great tactic using all the time. And then building authority and certainty with vocal tonality. So I know I'm talking loud and fast and everything, and normally I talk loud and fast, but when I talk in negotiation, I slow my roll 100% because which sounds more professional? Does it sound more professional when I'm like this and I'm presenting you an offer and I'm super excited that this is going to be great for my clients? Or does it sound more professional to be like, I have this great offer for you. My clients have put in a lot of time and effort to this, to come to this number. We are ready to close this deal. The second sounds more professional and it sounds more deliberate, right? So then changing your tonality actually really helps. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. We're doing so great. And still somehow kind of keeping on time.
Yeah.
Because the last part we're going to go through very slowly. So, okay, negotiating strategy. So this is phase 2. And this is where you get into the nitty gritty of actually crafting your negotiation. So we're going to start by talking about knowing your BATNA. So BATNA is a standard negotiating term, and it means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what a BATNA would look like is very specifically, if I was the listing agent and representing my sellers, and we had to sell because we already have an offer in another property, it's ready to rock. And so our best alternative to a negotiating agreement, like we have to get one done. So what comes in the door, we have to make that work, right? We don't have an alternative. We can't carry 2 properties, whatever it might be, right? So sometimes, in a hot market where the buyers are, fighting over properties, so the listing agent and the seller will have a much stronger BATNA because they can just wait for the next buyer to come along, right? Because they have lots of choice of buyer, but the buyers don't have a strong BATNA because there's less property. Make sense? So we need to figure out your strength in position based on your BATNA. All right. So we need to set clear objectives and boundaries around in this phase. So we have to establish what's nice to have and what's a must have, right? So, and that's on both the buy and the sell side. So for your clients, who are purchasing a property, for buyers, it might be that, they need to get it for a specific price or else they can't qualify, right? And if that's the case, then that has to be taken into consideration. And that has to create part of your negotiation and your contract. All right. And then, so moving right along, let's keep going. So understanding the other party's motivations. We talked a little bit about that in first phase, is gathering that additional intel and that additional information. And in this phase, on my side, what I do is I actually go sleuthing. So you get a copy of the title, right, from the listing agent. And then I take the owner's names and I put them into Google and I create them, right? Find out what's most important to those people, because it could very well be that, you just found out they had a divorce. Well, there you go, because that stuff ends up all over Facebook, right? But it's app, and it sounds absolutely crazy, but it's 100% true. You really want to be able to make your stance and understanding of the other party as thorough as possible. Like, you've got to flush out all of that stuff. So reviewing people on Facebook is part of that, right? We do that all the time. All right. We want to control the flow of information. That is something that is pretty important, as you can imagine. And that's the flow of information back and forth, not just between the party you're representing and the other agent, but from like the buyer to the seller and in all areas. So there's some bits of information you're going to want to hold back on, because they might become far more valuable and useful later in the transaction. Does that make sense? Right? You don't want to give away the kitchen sink. Let's put it that way. Hold a couple of cards close to your chest. You are playing a little bit of poker here. All right. So after that, it's leveraging market data to strengthen your position. People listen to facts. People do not care about your opinions. Straight up, hearing well, I think the market is doing this. No, the market is doing this, right? People do not care what it is your gut feeling says. You have to be very specific with that, all right? Using strategic silence. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's good just to shut up, all right? Not me right now, because I'm presenting, but it's 100% true. Especially if you're sitting down with a seller and you're doing a listing presentation and you've just dropped a bomb on them, right? Could be one about the property prices being a lot less than they're thinking. So something just that simple, and you want to let them sit with the information. So it pays to shut up and not say a word until they speak, right? You have to learn to be strategic with the way you communicate. And that comes in handy here as well. So controlling the terms and not just the price. As we know, price is great. Most people want, a lot of money for their properties, but terms make contracts, 100%. Dates make contracts, concessions make contracts, throwing in, closing costs, those pull deals together. So, and it's nice to put together when you're crafting your actual negotiation, say, okay, these are a couple of other things that we could throw in if we need it, right? Always have an ace in your back pocket. That's what we're trying to do. Keep your emotions in, craft your persuasive offers with logic and not emotion. So that is what we were talking about a little bit earlier. So you want to be logical about everything, and you want to create a story so there's an emotion around it, but you want to also temper the emotion. I know it sounds crazy, it's hard to explain, but you have to make sure that in the end you manage the emotions, but you sell the story. Does that make better sense? Yeah. All right. And keep your emotions in check. Like we've talked about a couple of times, it really does pay to be able to shut that off, walk away, and let something go, right? And if you can manage your clients' expectations ahead of time, you will manage their emotions throughout the rest of the transaction. Set the stage for everything, give them all the possibilities, and then you cannot go wrong when it comes to that next section, okay? And then finally, like I said, always have a backup plan. So have an ace in your pocket have something else that you can sweeten the deal with, not gonna give away the bank, and really try and get creative here. Like we were talking about creativity earlier. All right, excellent. Any questions about that stuff so far? I mean, again, this is a lot to cover and I know this is fast. Nobody? We're good so
Great.
far? Okay, awesome. So now, why negotiations fail? This is pretty self-explanatory, but we're gonna go through it. So first thing is lack of preparation, not going through any of those phases and getting the information that you need. So preparation is 100% absolutely key. And I'm gonna tell you the last place you want to be thinking about something is when you're sitting there at the negotiating table and trying to come up with something, right? This should be thought out before, all right? Dominating the conversation. So this for real estate agents can be very tricky because we like to over explain things a lot of the time, right? When sometimes you just need to shut up, which is what we talked about in the strategic silences, right? So we have a tendency to over communicate and over complicate. I'm not looking at a mirror at all, when it comes to conversations. 100% you need to dial that back and use your ears more than you use your mouth. All right. Why negotiating fail? Overconfidence and aggression. Oh my God, aggression can be absolutely the worst, right? And that's where you get that conflicting style of negotiation. And if you are overly aggressive, then you can tank an entire deal. I can promise you of that, right? So you don't want to do that. Failing to build relationships, which we talked about earlier. Again, it is hyper important in this industry to make sure that the relationship building starts well beyond ever getting to the negotiating table. So that's everything from the moment you walk into the open house and you're representing a buyer and you meet that agent to when you send them a message and you're asking for the documents. To the second that you send the actual offer, that's when I'm like, your clients are so lucky to have you on their side. You've been a great agent. Butter those people up. Oh my God. They love to hear that and they want to hear that. And do it even if they sucked, right? Who cares? You want to ingratiate yourself in that way to these people. All right. Competing again, instead of collaborating. Collaboration is the way we bring deals together. 100%. It is the best, tried, tested, and true. And you will always get a great deal if you do it that way. Not adapting to the counterpart style. So sometimes what can happen is if someone is very aggressive, it can be beneficial to come with a little bit of a stronger stance, not completely mirroring exactly what they do, but coming with a stronger position. That happens a lot when you're at the negotiating table with clients and you're looking at taking a listing, right? So we do things like mirroring them. So if they're sitting here in a position like this, you would mirror them as well to make them feel more comfortable and at ease and as if you were the same, right? So there's all sorts of small behavioral things that can fit into that. But adapting, again, is something that we all need to be able to do, especially when it comes to dealing with people. Making unrealistic demands. Yeah, you don't want to do that. I mean, it can tank deals. They can be pulled back from the depths of Hades, but it takes a little bit, right? So unrealistic demands can be very, very challenging. And that's like super, super low ball offers, that kind of thing. And there's ways to coach your client to get them over the hump so that they're not offering, completely unrealistic deals that are not going to move forward, right? Ignoring cultural and personal differences. There are a lot of cultures in Vancouver and in the Lower Mainland. And every culture actually deals with negotiating very differently. And over the entirety of your life in real estate, you will negotiate with a bunch of different cultures, not just people. And it's important to understand how different cultures react and how they will negotiate through the beginning of the transaction throughout the entire thing. All right. For more on that, there's definitely some great articles and then some great trainings that I can point you in the direction of. But it is something that is hyper important in our marketplace here, because without knowing those cultural norms for negotiating, you will be at a disadvantage for sure, right? Number 9, not knowing when to walk away. Sometimes you just got to tell your client, that's it, let's go, right? And you have to be decisive about that, which again comes back to that principle in negotiation, which is having the confidence and that self-knowledge. And you have to understand when you can walk away, because you do not want to be trying to catch the falling knife in a negotiation. That is, it's a very stark visual, but it's true, right? And sometimes that's what you're going for and you don't want it. It's sometimes time to walk away. And then lack of emotional control. Again, we talk about this a lot because if you don't have control in a negotiation of your emotions, it can get heated. I mean, I'm guilty of it. 100%. I had one of the worst transactions ever. And the individual on the other side, who was the listing agent, yelled at me for basically 20 minutes on the phone. And I got ridiculously upset and swearing, cussing. I couldn't even believe that I was doing it, honestly. And it was a terrible position for me to come from, to try and salvage the relationship and salvage the deal for my client. So what I should have done is hung up the phone, let it go. But I didn't have the skills at that point in time to understand that I needed that emotional intelligence to control myself. Right? So these things can happen to anybody. Just saying. All right. So let's move on to the rest of this. So this is, I wanted to give you the tactics, right? So this is the most important part. There's 15 of these that we're going to go through. And these are small tactics that you can put into pretty much every negotiation and you'll get some kind of a reaction for it. All right. So we're going to start first with use the flinch technique. So it kind of is just like what it sounds. So it's when the side makes an offer, so you can visibly react or overreact a little bit with a little bit of disappointment. So example, so somebody counters back at 900K and you're like, you pause, lean back, and you're like, oh, I just don't know how we're going to get that together. Right? So, and it's in that, just that little bit, it makes them question their position. You know, like, well, I really don't know that that's going to be something we can work with. The other side is going, oh shit, you know, they're not gonna be able to work with this. That's problematic from the buyer now, right? So you're sowing a seed of doubt, right? Sometimes that's all this is, sowing a seed of doubt. Number 2, silence is the weapon that we like to use. Again, so when you're making an offer, stop talking, right? Let the silence hit, because whoever speaks first loses. We've all heard that before, right? So, example. So if I was like, well, we're at 840K firm, and then silence. Well, that forces me to speak and say something. Well, I mean, I guess we could do a little bit more, right? Silence is a very powerful thing. Number 3, the decoy offer, or the red herring. This is one of my favorites. So you ask for something that you don't actually need and give that back a little bit later to throw everybody off. So ask for, maybe it's all the appliances, plus the dining set, plus the window coverings, right? And you're just like, you add this whole big list of things that you want. And when they start pushing back, you just say, okay, we'll drop the dining set. Let's just focus on the price. They feel like they've won something back, when in reality, there was nothing to win. It is sneaky. Yeah, right? But it's a great technique. And will win you deals for sure. Conditional concessions. So again, don't give stuff out without getting stuff back. For sure. The only time that doesn't actually work is when you're in multiple offers, right? So a little bit different on that side. Negotiating in a multiple offer is a totally different course than this one, because there are tips and tricks around it. But again, that is something, yeah, we'd have to talk about a little bit further. The feel, felt, found technique. So many people are going to have some sort of a version of this in their head already. So this is where you disarm the other side, and it's kind of, and I'll give you the best example that I wrote down. So, Mr. Seller, I understand how you feel about the price. Many sellers have felt the same way, but what they've found is that accepting a strong offer now prevents chasing the market down later. So I know how you feel about the price. Other people have felt the same way. Other people have found that accepting the offer now is the best course of action. So that diffuses their resistance and gives them another perspective, right? Very helpful in negotiations. Just taking that defensiveness away. Number 6, so if then statements, you're going to find a lot of those in the exactly what to say for realtors book. So those would be, so if we agree to closing in 45 days, then are you saying we can get the deal done today? If then, right? So focus on a commitment that you're getting from that. That all make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Ooh, time pressure tactic. Everyone knows this one. We're taking offers at this point in time, right? So if we're only leaving our offer open for 4 hours, we want an answer before you do your open house. That's your pressure tactic. Sometimes it works, sometimes it backfires. So you do have to know when to use it and when to use it properly, right? But it is a good one because you can force the other side to make a move, which is in your favor, right? Next, so 8, which is the higher authority play. So sometimes this can backfire too, so you do have to be careful about some of these ones. So, but it works fairly well when you create a little bit of space between you and your buyer or seller. So you blame your final decisions or you blame things on your seller or your buyer so that there's no more roadblocks between you and the other agent. So it would go something like this. Well, I'd love to get this done, but my clients are firm on price. I can take this back to them, but I'm going to need something from your side to get this done. Right? So I'm saying it's them that don't want the deal to come together based on what they're giving me. So is there another concession we can have? So I may very well know that my buyers will accept whatever they're saying, but I use that anyways to do a little negotiating, get a little something extra for my people. Make sense? All right, great. So let me just see where we're at. I want to make sure we're good for time. Oof, we're moving fast. Okay. So the number 9, let me see if I can get this approved trick. So that's pushing people a little bit and you pretend to talk to your client, right? I can get this approved, but I'll need some flexibility on closing dates, right? So you already know a little bit about what your buyer or seller is willing to accept, but you're again negotiating out another piece. So it's actually very similar to the higher authority. Number 10, offer 2 choices. So this is the illusion of control that we've talked about. So would you prefer accepting the $850,000 now or wait and risk competing with other new listings, right? You give them the choice of both. And basically, there's only one choice, right? So that's a great one as well. Number 11, start pacing and leading to actually shift a position for a seller or a buyer. This looks like this. I completely understand why you're at 950,000. It's an absolutely great home. That's why my buyers came in strong at 875. With market shifts, most homes are closing in that range. And I think if we can get close to that, we can wrap this up today. So again, pacing, leading the conversation and leading the other agent to realize that, oh yeah, this is where things are closing. And if we get into this space, we can get a deal done today. So then they're gonna go back to their seller and be like, this can be put together today. And we don't have to wait on the market any longer. Works great in a market like this, right? Number 12, so the contrast principle. So always make your offer look better than the other alternative, whatever it might be, right? So that could be before offering $850,000, mention your lower recent sales, right? Oh, well, the other home down the way, well, it sold for 805, right? So you're just contrasting your offer versus something else, right? The takeaway, so scarcity and FOMO is real, especially in real estate, as we know. We see that all the time in super great markets where everyone's trying to clamor for properties. But so if people start hesitating though, make them chase it a little. So at this price, my buyers are looking at another home too. If we can wrap this up today, they might not move on, right? So like, let's speed this up. It's kind of what we're trying to do. And then keep a deal killer in your pocket for sure. So something that is, have one non-negotiable in your back pocket, your ace up your sleeves, that you can restructure a whole deal when you need to. So something would be like, we need this to appraise at 900K or else we cannot move forward, right? So if needed later, you can relax that back, right? In exchange for another concession, right? So you make it sound like it's one of the most important things to your buyer, but it's not really. And then you can pull it back later and exchange something else to restructure the deal in a much better way that benefits your buyer. And finally, the last minute nibble. So after they think everything's done and it's all written in stone. Oh, by the way, since we're finalizing, can we just add the patio furniture into? Just throw it in there because most of the time, the other party will not want to reopen negotiation. And you'll just get it. I'm just gonna tell you right now, if you do not ask, you do not get. So always throw in the last ask, all right? Okay, I think we're good. I think we're good. We made it through. That's a lot, guys.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, baby.
I do actually have a question.
Oh, there.
You want to go first? No, it's me. So you go.
This is very easy. How effective are these tactics when it comes to online or tech? What is that?
Yeah, if you're doing online offers. and stuff like
Offers.
that.
Yes.
So here's the first thing, pick up the goddamn phone. Pick up the phone, right?
Yeah.
I know I'm dead serious. You do not want to be doing any negotiations over email.
Okay.
Pick up the phone. And a bunch of those will work still, but it's far more effective when you can have tonality in your voice and you can have those conversations. All right? Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone.
The question is actually about the same client that we talked about. So sometimes clients, you try to educate them, but they're like, it's just an offer. Put it might not accept it. And I feel bad because you're gonna question my expertise if I come with a very low ball offer, but they're not gonna moving forward with a different number. So they just have the mentality of just give it a try. So how do you deal in that situation?
Yeah, so you have two different competing things here. So first, as the agent representing those particular buyers, you need to do a better job of setting them up for success, right? And explaining where the market's at, what that looks like. Part of that is, right? And actually role playing and figuring out how to actually have those conversations and convince them. On the other side, if I was getting an offer and it was like, oh, well, okay, here's a low ball. Well, on my end, I actually don't consider low balls to be a terrible thing. I'm like, okay, you know what? Because I always tell the sellers, listen, there might be a low ball that comes in, but don't look at it as the number. Look at it as the overall deal and let me worry about the number, right? Because my job is to negotiate that better. But let's take a look at the whole contract, right? So on my end, I don't see a low ball as a terrible thing. I just see it as a way to get to a closed deal. So I think thinking about things differently also helps. That makes sense? Yeah. Anyone else?
Any other questions?
Oh, thank God, I've talked too much.
I have a couple takeaways. Don't know why I said troubleshooting when it was negotiating,
Yeah,
so I
that's okay.
apologize for that.
Same.
Some of the takeaways I got is you gotta practice. You gotta show emotion, but not be emotional. Not your house, it's not your offer, right? And if you go in all bubbly, the other guy's gonna beat you up. It's just a natural. Don't take it personal. Understand who you're dealing with on both sides of the deal. Understand your customer, understand the realtor, understand the realtor's customer. Nothing wrong with going to Google and figuring out who they are, because you might learn something there. You might even have something in common. And if you do have the privilege of presenting, then the relationship is always there, right?
100%.
My next page is this is like my cousin's favorite question is why. So always ask why. If you're struggling to understand the reason, ask them why. Can be with anything in life. You know, you got a repair bill, ask them to detail it. So why is the big question? One of the things Ms. Foster does, and I don't know if you guys realize it, she's always making sure that you are understanding the path and what she's taking. You get it? You understand what I'm saying? Get them to nod, right? When you get them to nod, then you know that you are communicating the message that you want to deliver. Give some choices. Sometimes in your negotiation, and the choices aren't that really big of a deal. Do you want a 30-day? Do you want a 45-day close? This and that. Let the other person be involved in it, because then they feel like they're getting something a little bit more.
And that they have autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really important, right? Already said know who you're dealing with. Know the facts. Key thing, you got to know your stats. You got to know your market, because if you try to, I'll say it, bullshit the person on the other side, they'll prove you wrong, and then you've lost your credibility. So take your time and go in prepared. Have a backup plan. Sometimes the backup plan could be there's another house we can look at to your buyers, to your sellers is I think I've got another backup offer coming, but understand where you are in the position of your negotiation. You want to keep it simple. The takeaway, I love the takeaway. Brian Rushton, my old boss, was brilliant at the takeaway. We'd sit at the table. We were selling franchises at the time. We're really close. Then it gets to a grind. And Brian used to have this big black book, the leather cape, and he just close it. And when you close it, the other person realizes that the door is closing. And if you're getting ready and you put your pens back in your pocket, sometimes it always comes back up for a conversation. So understand what your takeaway is and know your negotiation tactics, right? Because your job is to get the best deal for your customer. Your job is to be fair on both sides, but understand how to deal with that person. And yes, in today's world, we're doing a lot of this on the phone instead of being belly to belly and doing listing presentations. So my other takeaway is if you guys have the opportunity of presenting in person, present in person, because you're better in person than you are on a text, than you are in an email, than you are in a phone call. Because this again is a relationship business. That was a lot of stuff. We could spend an hour on just one of those pages, right? And maybe
And just
we will.
role playing.
And maybe we will. But again, guys, practice. And if you're going in on a listing presentation and you're new to the business, do it with your mentor. If you're established and you have some questions about what your style is going to be, play with Doug and I. Call us, come into the office, talk to us about what you're about to do. Bring in another realtor with not the heavy details, but just what your plans
We have
are.
lots of role play cards
Are
here.
those my cards or are those your cards?
I don't know. They're
Yeah,
I've got a lot
okay.
of
And
cards.
anyway, but yeah, you got to practice it. You got to be prepared because there's nothing. You don't want to be stumped in your plan, right? If you have your price all wrong and you have your comparables all wrong, because you did it 3 minutes before. You deserve to get what you get, which is probably unsuccesssul. But anyway,
You get what you negotiate.
thank you so much. That was
Okay.
brilliant. Thank you. All right, guys. Hang on. Anything? We've got Paul here for mortgages. You got anything you want to say, Paul, of what's going on?
Oh, come to the front.
Come up to the front.
Thank you, Rhiannon, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Good for you, that was great. The more I learn about your business, the more I can help your clients, so it's always good to be here. Interest rates, status quo, bit of a surprise today.
Into the frame a little. There we go.
So I was watching Mike earlier, I thought I landed perfectly. Bit of a scare, not a scare, but a bit of a surprise today, inflation numbers were up quite high. The bond market shot up this morning, but it's come back down, so as long as we don't see that month over month, we should be fine with fixed rates. I think it's gonna be flat to down from here on fixed. Of course, prime is gonna drop. It should drop a couple more times this year, so we're all good. I'm here to pre-approve your clients. I'm here to give them advice. I'm here to help them make decisions. There's a lot of choices. Life changes, so getting into one mortgage from a bank may not always be their best option. Banks sell their products. I provide advice. I listen to clients, so anyone that has questions, I'm here for you, and I'm happy to help out. That's it.
Douglas, do you have anything to say in the background there?
Oh, it's a great presentation, Rhiannon. I loved it. It was perfect. I thought it was great. Just one thing, maybe Mike, about paying the cooperating brokerage full pot.
Yeah, okay, so it's a tough market, guys. No one's gonna tell you elsewise, so be fair to the other side of the transaction. Don't cheap them down, give them fair market value in their commissions, and you'll get more eyes on your listings. Also, if you guys know, it's a competitive market out there. If you guys know realtors and other brokerages that aren't feeling the love, they're not getting the services and support that they could get when if they could be here, introduce them to me. I'd love to meet them. All right, guys, have a great week. Call me if you need me.